Honorable Member Machozi, to the candidate.
Chair, I sent her a reminder, but she has not responded. She had indicated that as much as she promised to join, but she had indicated the busy schedule. So I remain hopeful that she will join us as we proceed, Chair.
Thank you. But with regard to the numbers we have, we are able to proceed.
Definitely, Chairperson, we are able to proceed. We have 4 members on the platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I've seen that, like you said, the candidate has also joined us.
Yes, Chair. Ms. Carol Muhlala is on the platform, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Muhlala. Okay, I'm trying to check if Ms. Muhlala is able to hear us, because I see that she's still muted, both in terms of the mic as well as the video camera off. So I just want to be sure that she's also able to hear us as we.
Good morning, Chair. I can hear you. I had to switch off my video because the connection was bad. So
Okay.
I could see you guys, but I couldn't hear you.
Okay.
I can switch it on back for just a minute so that you guys can see me, and then switch it back off.
I think, honorable members, I would allow that so that it facilitates that the interview goes on. Yes, you can just switch.
Chair, can I propose?
Yes, Honorable Faku.
Can she switch on her camera so that if there's problems, then we can request her to switch it off? Thanks.
Yes, that's why I'm saying would agree that she switches on so that we know who we're interacting with, and that if there are problems, yes, then would allow the switch off and then proceed in that score. Okay. Would then take the opportunity to welcome you to this interaction with the subcommittee. So this is the subcommittee of the Committee on Communications, Ms. Muhlala, which is allowed by the National Assembly rules that a committee can set up a subcommittee focusing on a particular task. The task for this one is the filling of the vacancies that have occurred at the Mdda, and therefore marks the continuation of the interviews that would have started last week. So in that score, please feel welcomed, relax, and then enjoy the conversation, because we take this as a conversation with you, and out of the engagements that we would have with you, the committee can learn from you, as well as yourself surely would learn from interaction with members even beyond the interview itself. I will then, of course, without a waste of time, just deal with the formality of how we're going to approach the interview. Of course, we would introduce the members to you, because these members are drawn from different political parties in line with the electoral support they have in Parliament. After the introduction, we will then afford you 5 minutes to briefly introduce yourself, reflect on your academic and experience that you have, and how that will contribute to the SABC, to the Mdda, if you were to be considered for such appointment in the board. After that 5 minutes, we'll then go back to the members. Each of the members present would then have 5 minutes to engage with you, which will be both the questions as well as your responses in the 5 minutes. That helps you to guide you in terms of how you prioritize your responses in the 5 minutes allocated. So that's how it's gonna be. And later on, we'll give you an opportunity to address the committee once again in 2 minutes, and then we'll close at that point. So without waste of time, Ms. Mdda, I'll then introduce the members. On the platform, I do have, starting with the ANC, I do have Honorable Faku. Honorable Faku. Yes, that's Honorable Faku. Then we have the Honorable Kumbu. Honorable Kumbu, are you able to? Okay, Honorable Kumbu's video is also on. I'm sure you are able to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Honorable Kubeka from the ANC. Honorable Kubeka. That's Honorable Kubeka. I'm also from the ANC, Honorable Maneli, who's also the chair of the session. I then have from the DA, Honorable Mdda. Honorable Mdda. I hope you can see Honorable Mdda's video is also on. We do have a member from the IFP, Honorable Majosi, who is not yet with us, would have promised to join the meeting owing to another engagement demanding of her presence. That's Honorable Majosi. And then there's also the Honorable Pambo from the EFF, who's also not on the platform. However, with the numbers we have, we are in a position to proceed with the interviews, taking into account these apologies. We have the required number to do so. So those are the members as introduced to you. As I said, I will now allow you an opportunity, once again, relax, have a conversation with the committee. So you'll have 5 minutes between now and 12 minutes past. So we'll hear from you now. Over to you, Ms. Mdda. But as we have agreed, once you experience problems, to indicate so that we allow you to switch off the video camera, and that still you proceed to speak to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Can I first check if I'm audible?
Yes, you are audible and we can see you.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. As the committee has been told, I am Carol Mdda. I have been in the media industry for over 10 years now. I began my career as an intern at GCIS, at the Government Communication and Information Systems, under the publication Vuk'uzenzele. I then moved from GCIS and I spent about 9 years of my career at Media Monitoring Africa, where I got a chance to engage with the media, but also with the policy aspect. That is where my interest for community media was actually brewed. So when I started understanding why it's very important for community media to exist and to be preserved, and the importance of institutions like Mdda, that came from my experience at Media Monitoring Africa. From there, I moved from Media Monitoring Africa, and I was media and communication manager for Lawyers for Human Rights. And then I moved from Lawyers for Human Rights, and then I was then executive director at the Association of Independent Publishers that dealt directly with Mdda. And at that position, I also got a chance to engage, but also to have an experience of how things actually work at Mdda level. not only just how the policy aspect of life, but also how things actually work on the ground at Mdda level. And it was such a great experience. And then I moved from being executive director to being digital editor of a very growing small publication called Stockville Talk. That is where I'm currently at. And yeah, my experience in the media has taught me so much about the importance of media overall, but given the challenges that mainstream media are facing, I've also seen an opportunity for community media. And yes, there's been challenges, and I think I've been quite outspoken about some of the challenges that community media are experiencing, the role that Mdda can play in that, the role that the portfolio committees and oversight structure can play in that. And it has been quite a journey for community media, seeing the ups and downs, but also recognizing that it is important that our people get their voices heard, and that one of the best institutions to do that is through community media. My experience in the sector, I would say, puts me at the right level to actually serve at Mdda level, because I don't only come from a policy background, I've also had an experience as to how things actually work on the community side of things, and also have had very long engagements with Mdda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mhlala. We will now start the engagement with members, given the 5 minutes allocated. I will then start in the following order. I would have Honorable Faku, who will then be followed by Honorable Mbele, who will then take Honorable Gumbo, and Honorable Kubeka to be last. I will only come in on the questioning side if I have to just emphasize the point. Otherwise, I just do the facilitation in this regard. Honorable Faku, you are recognized. You can then proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to yourself, greetings to honorable members. Hi, Carol, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm good. Nice to see your face. I'm happy that we can see you. Thank you very much for the opportunity that you have taken to form part of the interviews, and it's good. I can hear you that you have depth knowledge of the industry, which is helping us. Thank you very much. I have 2 to 3 questions that I have for you. Now, my first one is, as you know, that there are challenges relating to the reinforcing of the Mdda funds as specified in the Mdda Act, which means that the sector of capacity building and research and innovations by Mdda cannot be supported adequately by the funds that Mdda is given by government. So, and you know that these are key issues that need to be urgently addressed. What do you think can be done? Hope you got my first question. My second question, as you know that everyone is complaining about the signal distribution cost. What do you think can be done to resolve the cost? My last question is, should community broadcasting sector compete with commercial broadcasters? Those are my 3 questions for you. All the best. I'll be listening. Hope you heard me.
Thank you so much. I think I've received all 3 questions. I'll tackle the first one in regard to funding. It has always been a very long and intense debate, and my stance on it has been, we understand that there's very limited funds, but Mdda as well, and I think the Mdda Act, it's something that we might have to look into. There's an opportunity that we are missing, and the broadcasters have been complaining about this for years on end, that they are by law forced to actually contribute towards Mdda every year. but the print guys, which is now the print/online guys, are not forced. And the print guys have used that as a gap. So they have always said, but we don't have money, so we're not going to contribute to Mdda. But we know on the sidelines, we know for sure that Arena, which is now called Tiso Black Star, which is now called Arena, used to give an organization that I worked for $1 million every year, no conditions, nothing. If they could do that for another NGO, what was stopping them from actually contributing to the Mdda? So there is that loophole where print/online, even though we understand that they have been bleeding money, have used this gap to say, we are not forced by law to contribute 1% of our profits to Mdda. So we're not going to even consider it. So Mdda can take a setback. So it's something that we should be looking at, that we understand that the media as a whole is bleeding money. But how can we get other people in the media sector to actually contribute to the Mdda? We know right now that Facebook and your YouTubes and everything are actually taking over close to 80% of the advertising. And we understand that they are multinational corporations, but how do we get them in the room and get a conversation going to say, we understand that, but we have to understand that we are trying to build a system here. Can you guys at least consider contributing to the Mdda? Those are the conversations that we shouldn't be shying away from. We should actually be having. So that is my stance on the issue of how do we get more funding to actually improve certain projects that the Mdda needs to do. And then the second one is regarding the fees.
Before you go to the second one, remember I said that there's a lack in terms of research and because of the funding that we're getting. So I want you to tap into that as well.
Yes. So we do understand that there is not enough research because of lack of funding. And like I think I've dealt with the issue of how can we then raise more money. But also maybe what we should also be looking at as Mdda is how do we collaborate with other people in the sector that have capacity to do this research. And then there has been opportunity. I think Media Monitoring Africa has worked with Mdda before to do particular research of particular community media sectors and how those can be improved. We can also start trying to work with other academic institutions that can get certain amount of funding to look at issues of research and innovation in the sector.
Okay, thank you. My second question, thank you very much.
Yeah, your second question, I should confess, is it's a tricky one, and it's a question that comes up almost on a yearly basis when certain community broadcasters fail to pay their fees and they're threatened with being cut off. And there's no two-way about it. We understand that Centec needs the money to actually carry out the service. At the same time, we also understand that community broadcasters need the service, but sometimes don't have the money. So now the question is, how do we then meet in the middle ground? How do we then make sure that we raise funding for these broadcasters to ensure that they can actually carry the very important service that we cannot underestimate the duty they play in their communities. But the thing is, where do we get the money for these fees? And they're quite high in most cases. And it's a conversation, like there's no real answer at this point. The money needs to be there. Community media doesn't have it. Centec needs it. And we need to come up with a solution as to where do we meet in the middle ground.
I want that solution from you because this is something that we have been stuck with as a committee as we're getting presentation from Mdda on a monthly basis, quarterly basis. This is where the problem is. And you've been in the sector. I want you to respond to the question, and I think you do have answers. Give me before your 5 minutes finish. What do you think should be done? Yeah.
I think for me, the solution would be we get the money from the public purse. And I know that the public purse at this point in time has so many holes we don't have the money as a country. But if we could plead with Treasury to actually cover this one for us, for me, that will be the solution.
Okay, thank you. My last one.
And then your last question, I'm so sorry, can you please repeat it? I think yeah.
Okay,
Can you please repeat?
okay, I was asking, do you think that should community broadcasting sector be competing with commercial and public broadcasters?
They should be. But remember, when we're talking about competition, we shouldn't be also arguing that because they are competing, then there is an excuse for a lack of quality or a lack of focus in terms of the communities that they are serving. But in terms of competing for advertisers, in terms of competing for space, they should have the necessary resources, the necessary skills to actually level up and play in those spaces. They should be.
Thank you, Chair.
I now recognize Honorable Mdda. Please proceed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I hope I'm audible. And good morning to you, Ms. Mushala. Thank you very much for availing yourself for this engagement as part of the subcommittee selection process. I think I'm largely covered in both your opening remarks and the response to Honorable Faku around the broad themes of how to build and ensure sustainability for the Mdda, as well as around partnership building, which I think is a key topic that you started unpacking. But I think along those lines, maybe I can just hone in on you are currently directly involved in the community media space in terms of the Stokvel Talk publication. And I think sometimes where there's untapped potential is that we talk about community media serving its market and its audience, and maybe not emphasizing that it's also really adding value, which then can provide the basis for tapping into resources and revenue. Do you have any experience or insight you can speak to about how, either through the space you are in now, or just broadly speaking, how community media can leverage their niche value add, how they can not so much compete with commercial media, but find those niche gaps, which can then become the platform and the mechanism for building those streams of sustainability and partnership, so they can really grow into their own. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Honorable Mbele. Yes, I think in my experience in interacting with community media, I've seen great examples of where they've found their niche and they've used that niche to not only add value, but also find their space in the bigger scheme of things. So currently with Stokvel Talk, how Stokvel Talk has remained sustainable over the years with very little funding, but lots of advertising and sponsorship, is because they found a way. So they found that, you know what, the Stokvel market is so big in South Africa. If we could just find a way of using that market to actually explain it better to the communities and to the public, but use that to actually draw in advertisers. So that's what we do. So we don't go to Toyota and say to Toyota, but we can offer you got a page for 250,000. Then you advertise with us. We say to Toyota, as Stokvel Talk, we engage with these many Stokvels on a monthly basis. You know, we know their stories, we know how they operate. And out of the people that we engage with, so many actually use Toyota. So if you want to actually get access to this Stokvel market, come to us and we'll open it up to you guys. And we've seen a success of that, where a lot of advertisers don't come to us because they're just mainly looking for advertising space, but they're also coming to us because they're trying to penetrate the Stokvel market. And that has been like a great success. And this is not only true in terms of Stokvel Talk. I know of a publication in Eastern Cape that focuses precisely on rural women. And I know Mdda has funded them for quite some time, but they've managed to carry their own for a couple of years now, because they've realized that, whilst telling these stories of rural women, we've got an opportunity here to bring in corporates, to bring in government, and to bring in all other people to come together and understand the struggles and also the achievements of rural women, and also trying to use that for us to remain sustainable. And there's a whole lot of other examples I could give you. One last one is a publication called Siponi News in Limpopo that has found niche in actually being one of the few publications that is competing with Isolezwe, but it's in Isipedi. And what the guy has done there is he's seen the gap that, the people that speak this language are so proud of it. And if I can get them to align with this brand of newspaper, which is Siponi News, we could actually not get, it's one of the few papers that still gets bought every day, and it's making money from cash sales a lot, and a lot of advertisers come to them as a small community newspaper to advertise with them because they know that it's one of the few papers that actually still get picked up on a daily basis. So just because also it's a publication in Sepedi. So there is that lot of opportunity in community media, and I've seen a lot of people that have seen this opportunity take it up and actually use it.
I will now recognize Honorable Kombo. Honorable Kombo.
Thank you, Chair, and greetings to Ms. Mdda. Just only two quick questions for you, Ms. Mdda. I can see that you are quite experienced in the media fraternity. I just want to know, how will your experience contribute in changing the Mdda and why? My second question will be, what do you think will be the role of the Mdda in promoting community media in the digital era environment? If you can just respond to those two questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Gumbi. Okay, in regards to your first question, I think my experience will add great value because, like I said in the beginning, I don't only come from the policy side of things, where I've studied the policy, analyzed the policy, and saw the gaps and the strengths and everything. But I've also been on the practical side of things, where I've worked directly with community media. I've interacted directly with the Mdda. I've seen what has worked in the past and what hasn't worked, and I think my experience will come in handy. And I think this is the point where I should say that in the past 3 years, I've seen a very strong change at the Mdda. I think in the past 3 years, this is the only past 3 years after quite some time that the Mdda has gotten 3 clean audits. They've been doing quite well. Obviously, they can't please everyone and fund everyone in the community sector, but we've seen an increased number in terms of their funding. And yeah, they've really been doing well. And I think my experience can add onto their current rate of success. And we could also improve in areas where they actually need improvement. And I think your second question was Mdda and the digital sector. A lot of work needs to be done to assist community media to actually move into the digital space. I think Mdda a couple of years ago began that process of trying to help, especially community newspapers and also community broadcasting, in terms of let's try get you a website, let's try get you to work. But it's a project that had really good intentions, but I don't think was received well by the community media space. And we need to, I think as Mdda, there needs to be a little bit more effort. And my previous criticism of Mdda was, how do you then want to assist people to move into the digital? Meanwhile, you were still lacking in the digital, because I think when they started that program, they themselves were still trying to figure out what was happening in the digital space. And I've seen the increased visibility on social media, and I've seen quite an improvement on the Mdda website. And I think that now they're at a point where they understand this digital space a little bit better, and they could then try again to see how they get community media on board. Community media is still lacking a lot in terms of digitization, and it's a conversation. It's not really. It's something that Mdda needs to start assisting them as a matter of priority. With print, it's not going to be that difficult. With broadcasting, it's going to be very important, because if we do move on with digital migration, we do not want our community broadcasters stuck in analog. And we are already as a country moving towards digitization. So we need to actually start moving on it, so that when the time comes for DTT, that community media is not left behind.
Thank you, Honorable Gumbu. I now recognize Honorable Kubeka.
How are you, Ms. Mushala?
I'm fine, and you?
I am okay a little bit, but Ms. Mushala, I can hear with your experience that you are presenting indeed to say, actually this environment that you wish to come into this space to assist. And also, I'm happy to hear that when coming to the side of the Mdda, you can see that they are trying their level best, as they have managed also even to receive for 3 successful years the clean audit. So can I just ask a question here on the side of the policies? That do you think Mdda on the side of the policies and the legislation, are they still relevant or on that side of Mdda? And can you just tell me how can also maybe the Mdda can try to overcome on the issue of the fake news? Because you can see that fake news now, they are still more taking a lot of space instead of giving people what is relevant or right for the community. So the last one, the coronavirus disease pandemic has not only caused significant challenges for health system all over the globe, even here in South Africa, and has impacted on the economy and the livelihood of our people. As the board member, what do you think the Mdda can do in order to respond to this health crisis? Those are the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Kubeka. Okay, I'll first start addressing the issue of policies. In terms of the Mdda Act, I don't think there's any. The only amendment that I would like to be called for is where there should be a section where we talk about, when we talk about funding, print should not be given a free ride. They've had a free ride for a long time, and that should should be discussed and handled appropriately. And I know that the MDDA is not only affected by the MDDA Act, it's also affected by the Broadcasting Act. At this point in time, there's not really much there, or the Electronic Communications Act. I think it still covers it quite well. And if we look at the Films and Publications amendment bill, there were a few issues there, but I feel with the latest amendments, those issues have been resolved. And then if we look at the ICASA regulations, like I think perhaps that's where we also have to look at it, where the regulations, when you look at them, they I've said this in the past, and as the MDDA needs to come out stronger whenever these regulations are put forward for comment, to say that subscription TV can get less local content quotas than community TV, because it doesn't really make sense. Local content costs money. Subscription TV has more money than community media, but have less expectation in terms of the regulations. We understand the notion that because it's community media and it serves the community must be able to see themselves through it. But remember the purpose of the regulations. They are a license condition, so we can't be scaring already economically fragile broadcasters to say, if you don't meet these quotas, we're going to shut you down. But people that have money to actually meet the quotas have less quotas. So for me, in terms of the law, that's issues that I think, in terms of policy, that's issues that we should be looking at. And then your second question was regarding the issues of, apologies, Ms. Kubeka, I think I have your third question.
Of fake news.
Of fake news, oh yes. MDDA has done a lot of work in terms of fake news. I think the last time they asked me to come and talk to various publications and broadcasters, we had partnered with an institution at Wits University, at Wits Journalism, fact checker, Africa Check, yes. And MDDA has done a lot of work with those guys to actually make sure that community media is aware of fake news and knows how to actually do fact checking before they actually publicize any news. But the thing is with fake news, it's they change every, like previously fake news would be like actually an outright lie. Like everything about that article will be a lie. And then it changed at some point. Fake news now was a lie and a bit of the truth. And as things change in the sector and how fake news continues to evolve, I think as MDDA also, the strategies on how to tackle it also have to evolve. So it's not only about seminars and creating handbooks and toolbooks, which MDDA has done quite a lot of. It's perhaps finding ways and editing tools that could assist community media to actually be able to tell what is fake and what is not. An example that I've always given to MDDA when they've asked me, what do we do? Because now there's this, I'm like, look at how Facebook has done it. It has this COVID-19 tool where if you're not sure about any COVID-19 news that you're reading about, you can actually go into it and it can verify the story for you. And perhaps with the money and the support, MDDA could actually create such a tool for all community broadcasters where they would say that, okay, if you have a story, you're not sure if it's true or not, run it through our tool, we'll assist you to try and verify it. And then the last question about COVID-19, I've always said COVID-19 kicked community media while it was still down. You know, it's not like it found community media healthy and, you know, viable and stuff, it found it already struggling. And the impact of COVID-19 on the community media sector has been horrific. You know, we've not only lost key journalists due to the virus, we've not only lost finances, but we've seen the sector shrink so much. It's devastating. And one of the things that we could do, which is also an opportunity for Mdda, is at this point in time, the best that we could do is rebuild from the start.
Honorable Kubeka. As I said, I just want to come back to a point you've raised. You've indicated where the gaps are in funding and so on, and what could be done. If you were to take that against what the Mdda has already put up and working on researching even further on that, which is the sustainable funding model. What's your take on that? Are the gaps that you are talking to beginning to be addressed? And if so, why would you believe that's the case? And if not, the same, why you think it's running short and what is to be done to get it working? Thank you.
Thank you so much. In terms of the gaps, there is still a few gaps. If you look at the sustainability model still is focused around the issue of giving the community broadcasters fish, but doing very little on teaching them how to fish. So one of the things that I think that the sustainability model needs to look at is how do we support community media beyond funding, beyond training, beyond skills improvement. And one of the things is we need to strengthen Mdda's advocacy. Mdda's advocacy over the years has been toned down. I remember a time where Mdda was actually rooting and very outspoken about the issue of the 30% loan advertising that needs to come from government going towards community media. And that voice has slowed down over the years. I think if the sustainability model could actually strengthen the advocacy part of it, where we are saying we're doing more than just give these people the skills and the training and the money to actually run these media houses, but we also want them to get proper backing so that without our support, they are still economically viable somehow.
Thank you, Ms. Motlala. As I said, would also again give you an opportunity to speak to the committee, having engaged at this point. And that I will give 2 minutes. After that, would just move towards the closure of this session with you. Over to you.
Chair, at this point, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. No, thank you, Ms. Motlala. As we get to a closure of this session, I take it that what I raised earlier on would have been achieved, that through this engagement, surely the members would have also learned a few things from you, which goes beyond the interview, that in the course of doing the work of the committee that plays oversight over the Mdda, we can be able to get back to some of the experiences that you've shared with us as the committee members. And I also take it that yourself, having interacted with the questions asked by members, you'd still leave the interview having drawn some lessons that will go beyond the interview itself. But at the formal level, just to bring to your attention that for administrative inquiries that you would make, Mr. Ngoma, who has been interacting with you in preparation for you coming to the interviews, would still be in a position to clarify any matter you'd want to clarify. I think from the side of the committee, we continue to do the interviews with other candidates that the committee would still hear, and our processes, as you know, are quite transparent, that South Africans can follow what we do up to a point when a report gets to be adopted by the House. So in that regard, we really thank you for making time, and hope that you are still able to do your work in this space beyond this interview. Thank you. And Mr. Ngoma, you'll then assist us in that regard as we would get to the next candidate. Thanks, Ms. Mdda.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Yes, Chairperson, the next candidate is on the platform, and that would be Grace Kutsi. She is on the platform, as you would see on the camera. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Okay, I hope the other members are able to see you, and you're also able to hear us quite clearly. Because I can see you from this side. Okay, but I do see that your video camera is now switched on. So welcome to this subcommittee. This is a subcommittee of the communications portfolio committee in the National Assembly. So it's been created in terms of the National Assembly rules by the committee to focus on the Mdda, filling of the vacancies that have occurred in the board. And we really want to welcome you as this committee, and really plead with you that you relax and just have a conversation with the committee. We take this indeed as a conversation, more than just an interview, in a way that helps us to engage with you. And I'm sure as members would engage with you, you'll be able to draw lessons from their questions, but also your responses could learn from that as members, even beyond this interview. And I'm sure your interactions before with the committee would have helped you also, as I said, beyond that previous interview we may have had with you. And you are here before the committee once again, and we are really looking forward to engaging with you. Just the formality of how we're going to approach the interview. I will then first introduce the members, because we have got members of the committee drawn from political parties as per their electoral support in Parliament. And once I'm done with that, we'll then give you 5 minutes to briefly introduce yourself to the committee members. Of course, also sharing your academic and your experiences and how that could contribute to the Mdda if you were to be considered to serve in the board. After that, we would then give an opportunity to each member to ask questions and your responses, and that will be done in 5 minutes allocated for each member, which will then take into account, as I said, the question and your responses. Thereafter, I would probably come in only where I need to just raise a point that may have been raised and I may have sort of picked it up from the answer that you've given, if I've got clarity on it as a facilitator of the session. And then we'll then afford you once again an opportunity, 2 minutes, to speak to the committee before we close the session. So please feel welcome. This is indeed a conversation that we're having with you. Relax in that scope. So please feel welcome, Ms. Kutse. Without a waste of time,
Good
as I said,
morning.
please feel welcome. As I said, relax and enjoy the conversation. We will now quickly go to the members to introduce them to you. They will switch on their cameras as they introduce themselves. I will, background sound, I'm not sure which side it is. Okay. We will then start with the ANC members. I will then start with introduction of the Honorable Kubeka. Honorable Kubeka.
Morning, Miss Place.
There's Honorable Kubeka here. Then Honorable Faku.
Good morning.
Yeah, there's Honorable Faku. We also have Honorable Kumbu. Honorable Kumbu.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, there's Honorable Kumbu, that completes the ANC members with myself, Honorable Maneli as the chair also. Now I move to the Democratic Alliance. We have Honorable Mbele.
Apologies, Chairperson.
Honorable Mbele. Okay, there's.
Camera is on, Chair.
Okay. Honorable Mbele. That's from the Democratic Alliance.
My apologies, Chair. My
Yes.
apologies, Chair. I think the background noise
Hello?
comes from the candidate. Can you just check with her whether she's with us, because I suspect that she might not be following, because there's background noise also, and she's trying to get the attention on video, but there's no sound that's coming from her even after she's unmuted. Maybe if you can just test it quickly and see that it works and she's with us. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, may I just check that, Ms. Kutse? May I just check if you can still hear us?
All right, Chair, she's off the
Since we've
platform.
lost her.
Yes, we've lost her, Chair. I'll do the background work. And yeah.
See if in 2 minutes we're able to get it back.
She's joining again, Chair. She's online, Chair. We can try Ms. Kutsia again.
We can proceed. May I then check if she can hear us?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I can. I apologize for the delay and for my network. It seems to have dropped me.
No, it's good that you're back. And then I'll just complete the intro I was doing, just for noting that we have two other members who are not with us, one from the IFP, Honorable Madozi, and the other from the EFF, Honorable Pambo, who have not joined us, but were able to proceed given the number of participants, of members present. So then that, in a way, helps to deal with the introduction of members. And as I said, I will give 5 minutes to proceed. So that the background sound seems to be coming at you from your side. I just hope you'll still be able to hear us. So over to you, 5 minutes, brief introduction, your experience, your academy, and how it can contribute to the game. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A very good morning to the honorable members. My name is Blaise. I am a graduate of the University of the Witwatersrand, where I studied both my BA, or rather obtained both my BA in International Relations and Law and my LLB. I am a qualified liquidator and business rescue practitioner, and I'm also set to become an admitted attorney of the High Court next year. So I do believe that my qualifications, range from a broad spectrum. Prior to going into law, I had experience in radio and in media, copywriting, and I think, and also that's also I have accreditation, HOP accreditation in film. So I do think that my skills range, from legislation to film to media, and I think that is something that sets me apart as a candidate. I mean, I would describe myself as someone who's very outgoing, someone who's very driven, someone who believes in women empowerment, and I think for the mere fact that, this is my second time appearing in front of the committee, which I'm very proud of and very thankful for. I think that it's so important that as young women, we take up space in sectors that are predominantly male dominated. And of course, in sectors where we need to have our voices heard and our stories told. I think something like the media is so powerful, and when used in the right way, especially given, from a woman's narrative, I think that so much change can be incorporated into a country and stories that need to be told and need to be heard. So I'm very thankful to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Without further waste of time, I will now call the members in the following order. We'll start with Honorable Faku, followed by Honorable Mbele. Honorable Mbele would be followed by Honorable Kumbu, and Honorable Kumbu will then be followed by Honorable Kubeka as the last. I would only pick up if there's a matter to just lift up, otherwise I'm doing the facilitation in that way. So we'll then be taking the 5 minutes of each member, which is questions and your response. Honorable Faku, you are recognized. Honorable Faku, can you hear us?
Hi, Chair. Hello.
Yes, Honorable Faku, you can proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson, very much. Hi, Blaise. How are you?
Hello, Honorable Parker. I'm good, and you?
I'm good. Nice to see you again. You've been here before.
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you don't have to stress, try and relax, and yeah, we'll try and not to be too hard. Thank you very much for coming back again. I'm happy that you are back, and I see that you are doing very well. You are a liquidator now, which is something good. You are improving your understanding or your knowledge. That is what we appreciate, and we appreciate that you are a young woman. You are coming again. That is what we must do. Sometimes it will not come out the right time, the second time, but we must never give up. So my first question would be, hopefully, Chair, this will not take my 5 minutes. So my first question, please, is what is your understanding of the role of media and media diversity? And my last one is, what is your corporate governance experience? Do you understand the role of a board against that of management? So those will be my 2 questions for you, please. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Faku. I think to answer your first question, the role of media and media diversity. As I said in my introduction, the media is a powerful tool that we use, to disseminate information for entertainment, for educational purposes, for so many things that I think are critical in today's modern society. I think media diversity in that sense is not one narrative being told. So making sure that regardless of your background, regardless of your ethnicity, your race, your class, you're still able to access truthful and reliable media and media sources. I think that's the role of the MDDA purposely, obviously to take the media to areas where necessarily it wouldn't be found. I think that the media in itself plays such a pivotal role in shaping, societies and communities, and then of course youth and the leaders of tomorrow. Because in my opinion, what we see in the media and the information that we're exposed to plays such a critical role again in what we are going to be shaped into tomorrow. So I think that it's so important that so many different stories are told on these different platforms. And then in terms of corporate governance and the board, I do think that the board, the role of the board is more high level, so to oversee the management and various and govern the various relationships between stakeholders and partnerships. I think that especially the role of the board of the MDDA is so powerful because again, the media is something that I think needs, is something that needs a lot of attention, especially now, living in this fourth industrial revolution, now going on to the fifth. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Honorable Faku.
Yes, thank you very much, Grace. All the best.
Thank you, Honorable Faku. I now recognize Honorable Mpele.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning to you, Ms. Gutsia. Thank you very much for availing yourself for this engagement as part of the selection process. I have just 2 questions. The first one is just looking at your submitted CV. I see that you are currently involved in and gaining career experience as a business restructuring professional, as it says here. So I imagine that means you have some insights and understanding of organizational analysis and weakness and opportunity identification, that sort of exercise. So a question that I always have asked many of the candidates so far is, from a perspective of what I've been calling strategic gap identification, what would you say from your observation and understanding is a key shortfall in the MDDA currently that you would see yourself potentially being able to help address and turn around? And then linked to that question, what is your unique value add that you believe you have to contribute to the MDDA board in terms of your skills, networks, experience, especially around building its sustainability and partnerships going into the future? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, to answer the first question in terms of the strategic gap identification, when studying the legislation, that governs, or the legislation that the MDDA predominantly relies on, and then looking at the objectives of the MDDA, I mean, one of the objectives is to maintain, encourage control, encourage ownership. And then if we look at, the requirements, so to say, or the requirements of, predominantly the funding that the MDDA does offer, I see that one of the requirements is having a license. And if we look at, so from my perspective, I would think that the gaps necessarily lie in between, the requirements of receiving the funding and then receiving the funding. So if the MDDA, like I'm saying, encourages ownership, but then, especially ownership for predominantly disadvantaged people, we need to then go back and say, okay, in order to make the ownership sustainable, perhaps if I look right now at the funding application, just say a normal person of the youth wants to apply for funding, there's a lot of requirements. It's bank statements, and I do get that is necessary, of course, in order to maintain sustainability. But if we want to encourage ownership, especially for those previously disadvantaged, we need to make a bridge, and we need to build a bridge between having that ownership and then entering your entry into the market, or entry into the gateway of you getting that funding. So I think predominantly that's where the gap for me I've kind of identified lies. I think that there are many other ways that the MDDA can look at to kind of fix this, whether it be skills development, whether it be, diversifying its funding modeling, but again, in a sustainable way. And I think what's going to build that sustainability, especially with the model, is that the people or the public or communities must trust in the service delivery. So if advertisers, if sponsors, if corporates continue to see value for this and sustainability, especially now with the problems that the youth are facing, the high unemployment rate. I mean, if we look at the stats between the youth between the ages of 16 and 24, about 64% of them are unemployed. So in order for us to create sustainability, we need to then look at the key aspects of, okay, what are the barriers to entry? How can we address this? And in addressing that, how can we create youth employment? Because that's where it is. And if you look at media is something that's so central to the youth. I mean, it's how our culture is spread. It's how we interact with each other. And it's so crazy because you'll find that, that's just, it's whether it be through social media or through interacting with each other, the youth kind of just draws to this central culture, which is based around, again, media. So I think in looking at that, we can definitely try and address those gaps and then create and forge a way that is sustainable for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mdda. I will now recognize Honorable Kumbu. Honorable Kumbu.
Thank you, Chair. And how are you, Ms. Mdda?
I'm very well, and you?
I'm happy to see you again.
I'm happy to see you, Untitled.
Yes. No, I just have two quick questions here for you. If you, I just want to understand the changes that you will bring to the MDDA board if you happen to be appointed. So that would be the first question. And I also want to know your proposals. What your proposals will be on how the MDDA can remain relevant and sustainable. If you can just respond to those.
Okay, thank you, Honorable.
Questions.
Yes, I had the questions. I will start with the second one. How can the MDDA remain relevant and sustainable? Upon, obviously doing research and seek exactly where the costs are, or where, the leakages seem to be in the organization. I find that, something that is a very pressing matter is expenses, and then, the funding of these expenses. So for instance, licensing, I think that is something that I would want to propose and something that I would seriously want to look into. And I think for various reasons. Again, I'm very passionate about youth employment and like opening up the markets. I know that's like a buzzword that's going on now, but it's so true. And when I say opening up the markets, I don't necessarily just mean for artists, for young creatives, but also for people who want to participate in the business side of the creative industry. Example, licensing. So if we look at what's been happening with the high prices, so predominantly from my understanding, there are two major signal networking organizations that's provided for right now. And if I look at that just from a perspective, again, from a young person, if we look at history and where what's the history of the organization and how the history of broadcasting in itself. So firstly, when it started, before Centec and Obicom, were brought in, these were predominantly regulated by the postmaster and by various arms of, of the government. So from my understanding, how we can access or again create jobs in this market. I'm sorry, can I just have 1 second just to gather my thoughts? Okay. So from my understanding, how we can create jobs in this market is by, again, opening it up. So post 1994, I understand that, this is something that the board did look at. This is something where the board considered bringing in, different competitors. And obviously, different competitors means that the market is not going to be dominated by a few players that are then going to, whether it be raise their prices or create unfair competition. So for me, again, in tying it back to youth empowerment, I would want to bring certain aspects back to the organization that, again, create jobs and allow for access for all, especially for markets that are like dominated by monopolies that have been there for quite some time. And then to answer the second question, what changes I would bring to the board of the MDDA, I would definitely want to see more young people represented. I would definitely want to see more young people who aren't afraid to take a risk and take a chance and stand up and say that our voices need to be heard. Yes, the youth is not seasoned, as you can see, honorable members, from this interview alone. I'm very nervous, but I do know that I'm very passionate about it. And I think that's something that we need to do and something that we need to work on, I think as a collective, as leadership, is taking young talent and nurturing that young talent, because like I'm saying, young talent and our seasoned professionals do need to work hand in hand, because the truth of the matter is, especially in something like media, you need people who are on the ground, you need young people who are dynamic, who know what the market wants, who are agile, who are able to adapt. And I think that, necessarily that might not always, when you're young, you might not always have experience on your side, but when you do have, your head in the right place and you are willing to work and to find out the information and you're passionate about it, I do think that coupled with seasoned professionals, that makes a formidable team, and that can definitely take the board to higher heights. I genuinely believe, and I think that that's something that I can bring in terms of my skill set. I think that I'm someone who's, agile. I'm someone who's a team player. I'm someone who's a fast learner. I'm someone who has very innovative ideas. I may, like I'm saying, not know everything right now, but I feel like as long as the youth, especially if you're going to represent the youth as a young person on these platforms, you need to be able to show that, you may not know everything, but it doesn't mean that you need to shrink back from opportunities. If anything, you need to stand up and take up that space and say that, yes, we are young, we are still growing in our professions, we're also growing in so many aspects, but we're here and we want to learn and we want to take that initiative. And that's the zeal and that's the attitude that the youth needs to see. And what more powerful place than to show that message and showcase that message than through the media. So thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. I now recognize the Honorable Kubeka.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much. How are you, Miss Blaze? Welcome again in the second round.
Thank you, Honorable Rebecca. I'm good. How are you?
I'm trying. I'm happy to hear that at least, indeed, you've got a passion on the side of the youth, the oomph and the zeal that you are presenting, indeed, to say at the end of the day, this is a high time now for us, abogogo nabomkhulu, just to shift a little bit in order that we must open the space for the youth. So indeed, it's great because it will encourage other young people in order to challenge this space of this industry. I hope right now, as you are trying to show us and convince us to say, indeed, as young people, you want also to be on the front line. We are listening to that. I'm just having only 2 questions, Honorable Kotze, that you just to respond to it. Do you think that the community media can compete with the public broadcaster or the commercial media? If yes or no, give us a practical solutions that the agency can implement. And also, can I just ask this one to say, on the side of the MDDA policies and legislation, do you think they are still relevant at this present moment? On the side of MDDA, how can maybe be renewed, or do you think that they are still well and good, and then you just elaborate on that? And also, can I just ask to say, if you were indeed in the space of being a board member, what do you think can we do, especially on the side of the fake news? Are you convincing to say something needs to be done, or it needs to be balanced, or do you think it's well and good, as we can see that the fake news now, they want to occupy much more space rather than the news that we are expecting to give to our communities and our South Africans, in order that they must just follow in a good and ethical, proper manner. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the question about the fake news. I do agree that, the new plight of fake news that is taking over is of great concern for many reasons. Misinformation, especially in the times that we're living in right now with COVID. I think, if anything, the MDDA right now, and not just the MDDA, but media in itself faces, and across the world, it's not a problem that's unique to South Africa or to Africa. Just about misinformation and fake news. I think that in order to curb this, what we can do is work with our service providers. We can work with young people, and then of course we can. But in working with young people and our service providers, we need to have a sustainable model, which I believe ties back to education. And then, of course, what I would propose in this instance with our service providers is zero-rated websites, where people can go on and educate themselves on what fake news is, how to spot fake news, and the dangers of fake news, because the thing is, so easily with information, you'd find that fake news actually spreads faster than the real stories. So if we can then, educate people on what fake news is and then reward those for who blow the whistle on fake news, I think it'll show, it'll set a precedent in communities, especially communities that are hard hit by fake news, especially during these times again of COVID, where we encourage people to vaccinate, we encourage people to social distance, just getting the communities to educate themselves, and to societies and whole to educate themselves, and then to help the next person. I think, shining a light on that is something that we can definitely do, again, working with strategic partnerships. In terms of the policies and the regulations, and the legislation, my apologies, again, tying back to what I was elaborating to earlier on, I do think that there is room for a renewal, for the committee to come together and look at the act and see how we can improve it. I think that, again, as much as the Mdda does give funding and but it has these very strong objectives of ownership and control and promoting media, I do think that there are still places in the framework where barrier to entry is high, and it's not necessarily accessible to people who may not have a good understanding of how to even use technology, or how to understand, or how to even begin to research how to apply for a license. So I think that if we're going to be, if the objective of the Mdda is to take media out to places which are predominantly previously disadvantaged, we need to look at the holistic picture. We can't just look at the one end of the spectrum without understanding the other. And then, of course, we need to understand that previously disadvantage and ownership, there is a big bridge between that. So looking at that and addressing that, I think, again, that is something that we need to look at, and that is something that, again, will build sustainability of the organization. And then whether the community media can compete, I think what's really, and this is a pro and a con with community media, what's really, some advertisers and sponsors tend to shy away because they don't feel that it's necessarily their market, or that, their messaging will get across, or that they'll get value for money. But when we look at what's happening right now with micro influencers, I know that a lot of, and Instagram and social media, a lot of people are now, as opposed to, spending their marketing budget on huge campaigns, they're going straight to their target market. So I think it's about redefining the community market. It's not, I think there's this whole myth that, small communities are so detached from the world, whereas in fact, globalization has made us one. If you look at the likes and dislikes, just because yes, there are factors that may influence, people's spending quota and people's income, but if you really look at it, I think the way media is, especially amongst the youth, it travels so quickly. So I think it's about rebranding what community media is, rebranding the target market of community media, of communities, and then taking that to the advertisers and sponsors and showing them that, listen, this is a platform that can grow. I know that previously, I think it was a study in 1997 that was done where the SABC looked at the viability of community radio, and they said it's not viable purely because they didn't see any profits, infrastructure, monetary injection, high startup costs. But then they revisited again in 2003, and they found that, obviously with the development of technology and lower startup costs because of additional funding, etc., this could be something that's viable. And then in 2003 was a long time ago. That was the last time the study was really touched on. We are now in 2021 going into 2022. So I think, again, with the right strategic partners, with the right method and just innovative ideas, we can make it work. And I think especially now in COVID with the media, it's really just struggling so much. We need as much as possible avenues of generating income as possible. And then I think that also takes strain off from the budget of the MDDA. If you look at it, I know that there was spending, especially now in COVID, I think it's strengthening. So funds that are set aside for strengthening products and strengthening programs, sorry. But if we were to look at other avenues, I mean, especially now, there's international funding for media houses that are struggling. I mean, there's SANDF as well. So again, diversifying that will alleviate so much pressure off the MDDA and its budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Kubeka. If I may just come back to the point you've raised on what are possible solutions to get the MDDA relevant. Maybe just to check, looking at the sustainability model for funding projects of the MDDA, what is your assessment, and whether the things that you've raised with the committee thus far, you think are covered in that, or what is it that needs to be done to improve it even better in the 5 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think, there are so many avenues that we can take in terms of funding projects. I think tying up with strategic partners in Africa and also around the world, because media is not just something that affects one region or one country. It's something that, it's a global market. So I think, and I know that obviously the MDDA prioritizes funding for audiences that are local as opposed to foreign audiences. But I think, in stepping out, media, people want to hear African stories. People want to see what we have to offer the world. And, I think with the rise of a lot of our production now, like with example, Blood and Water, that did so well on Netflix, that was #1. I think in the US and in other countries outside of Africa, I think that, it shows us that our stories are, we are sitting on a gold mine, and it's our people, it's our culture, and that is something that we need to figure out how to export and profitize. I think that, if anything, we've got everything that we need here. Our country is beautiful. I think that it's just a matter of, like I'm saying, finding ways that we can export our culture and then make it profitable for us. I think that so many of the times we find that our stories are told, but it's in such an exploitative way, where again we are left on the back end of the foot, and that the income that's generated from that is not necessarily put back into our projects, which is a problem. So I do think that also we need to look at corporates. There's CSI spend, whether it be government budgets, a certain amount needs to be given for media or for media projects, especially in the communities, and then empowering those communities. I think it's all good and well to receive funding and budgets, but then again, for me, it's about sustainability. It's about creating jobs, especially for those who are a part of the food chain, are a part of the cycle. And right now, we can't deny that that's the youth. And again, the youth, I feel like the youth that we're living in right now, they're so innovative. There's so many ideas. Content creators are literally on every, and it's different types of content. I mean, the youth is, you get business minded, you get people who create funny content, you get people get real content, but it's all tied back to the youth. And I think it's again investing in them so that they can take the project further. And I think that that's what we really need to think about. Thank you.
I think now we have come to a point where we must hear you in 2 minutes. That you would want to say to the committee before we close the session. Over to you.
Thank you, honorable members. While it has been such, it's really been, I'm so thankful to have appeared before you today. It has been such a great opportunity. I do believe that, again, I am the best candidate for the board because I do believe that I can bring something that's fresh, something that's innovative. I do think that I'm someone who's very ethical. That is what my profession is tied into. And I think that's something that, especially as the youth, we need to be able to be privy to young ethical people who are, being groomed and being made for these positions. Further to that, I do believe that I'll be able to take the board to greater heights because I do believe that I do have a lot of innovative ideas. I do think that I'm able to, because of the profession that I'm in, I'm able to analyze situations, not just from one perspective, from a array of perspectives. And then, of course, with my business risk and my liquidation background, I am able to come into organization and see prior experience of how other businesses have failed and other organizations have failed and how we can type those in quickly without it leaking too much and then of course collapsing the whole organization. So I do think that I'm versatile. I do think that I will be able to quickly learn and quickly adapt, especially in the areas where I may lack, and learn from my esteemed colleagues that I will be working with, because I think there's so much power in admitting when you don't know, and there's so much power in standing up and taking the lead when you can. So I think those two things definitely make for a formidable combination, and I do possess those qualities. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Kutse. And we really thank you for the time. As I said, we are now moving towards closure. And I also know it's the time for members to get also closer to the house. But we did very well with regard to time and precise responses that members would have needed. Of course, I'll just deal with the formality question before I close formally. That for all other inquiries administratively, you would speak to Mr. Ngoma, who you were speaking to as you prepared to come for the interview, in case there will be such inquiries to be made. But from the committee side, I would want to come back to the point that I raised earlier, that indeed this was a conversation with you. And I take it that you would have learned a few things from the members beyond this interview. And that as members, for sure, we have also drawn lessons from some of the things you've raised with the committee as we do our oversight work on the Mdda going forward. We really value the inputs that get made by South Africans who come before this committee to share their experiences. This then takes us to the closure of this session we've had. Once again, thank you, as Mr. Ngoma will then be preparing the next candidate to join the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ngoma, if you can just indicate.
Chair.
Honorable members, it would appear that we have lost Mr. Ngoma. Can Mr. Malika or Mr. Force try to admit the next candidate, Mr. Mashangan?
Chairperson, I've just admitted the candidate, Mr. Mashangan. Over to you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chairperson, I'm not sure if you can hear me. The candidate is already admitted on the platform.
I think Chair's got network problems. Can you try and call him?
Good afternoon, members. Myself and Chairperson are struggling with the connection. So hopefully he will join soon. And I'd just like to request the co-host, Mr. Foss and Mr. Maleka, to be on the lookout for him when he joins, to accept him. I'm still trying to connect on my other device. Thank you.
Mr. Malika? I take it that you are saying the candidate is within.
Yes,
I think the struggle
Chairperson.
is that we are now traveling in between the residents and Parliament. I hope I can still be here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Chairperson, you are audible to me. It's Honorable Mbele here.
Okay, I can hear you well also, Honorable Mbele.
Can
I just
Mr.
wanted to
Ngoma
check.
switch off his mic, Chair? Can Mr. Ngoma, can the table mute him?
That's coming up. We'll try and get a hold of this case number because it has.
May I just check if the candidate is in so that we then proceed?
Where there are reports that have findings.
Chairperson, Mr. Post Masangwane is on the list of participants. If you can just switch on his camera and greet Chairperson.
Okay, no, thank you for that clarity. Let me then take the opportunity to welcome Mr. Mashwangan, our candidate. This is the meeting of a subcommittee created by the Committee on Communications to deal with the filling of the vacancy on the Mdda, which you were duly nominated for. And I'll just, without a waste of time, given the connectivity challenges at this point, just to indicate that from a formality point of view, how we are approaching the interview will be to quickly introduce the members of the committee which are drawn from different political parties on the basis of the support that they have received in Parliament. And thereafter, we'll then give you an opportunity to introduce yourself in 5 minutes. In that 5 minutes, you will also share your experiences and academic development and how this will contribute to the Mdda if you are to be considered for appointment. I'm made to understand that the background is not helpful. Can I sort that out immediately after this introduction, Honorable Fag? I understand that it may be noisy because of the traveling, right? But I'll try and sort this out before the candidate comes in. So I was just saying that that's how we are going to approach the interview, and I will then, for purposes of ensuring that I address what you are raising, I will ask that we start with the ANC members, that you introduce yourselves whilst I'm dealing with that matter of the background, followed by the Democratic Alliance in that order. Thank you.
Honorable members, the chairperson requested that while he's sorting out the issue of the noise, that you in the meantime introduce yourselves to Mr. Mashwangan, starting with the ANC members. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Masangani.
Good morning, Honorable member.
It's Honorable Kubega from the side of the African National Congress, Honorable Masangani. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Kubega.
Good morning, Mr. Masangani.
Good morning, Honorable member.
This is Honorable Gumbu from the African National Congress.
Good morning, Honorable Gumbu.
Good morning, Honorable Mashwangai. It's Honorable Fako from the ANC. Nice to see you again. Apologies for all the disruptions. We sincerely apologize. Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Gumbu. Thank you for the warm welcome. So technology has got these challenges, but let's not stress ourselves about it. It will be sorted out.
Okay.
No, it was Honorable Faku.
Okay, and then to introduce from my side, I'm Honorable Zakele Mbele, subcommittee member from the Democratic Alliance. So greetings to you, Mr. Mashangwan.
Good morning, Honorable Mbele. Thank you very much for the warm welcome.
I hope at this point then I'm better audible than earlier on. Can I be heard?
Yes, Chairperson, you are audible.
Okay. I take it that Mr. Mashangani would have seen me and therefore would know that he's still talking to me. Yes, Honorable Maneli, ANC, as well as the chair of the session.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to you.
Good morning. I must just indicate that we do have other representatives from the other parties. In this instance, the IFP would have been represented by Honorable Majosi, who could not join at the time. Honorable Pambo represents the EFF, who would have not joined at the time. But you can be assured that the committee is able to proceed with the interview given the broader representation that we have at this point and that we comply to the requirements for the committee to proceed with the interview. So I just thought it's important for your record to also note that indeed it's a reflection of parties, like I said, on the basis of the electoral support they have in Parliament. And on those bases, we'll proceed with the interview. Having introduced the members, it then presents the opportunity for you in 5 minutes, as I said, to briefly introduce yourself to the committee members, of course, reflecting on your background and experience, and how it will now help the MDDA if you were to be considered. This is so because the members have got access to your detailed CV and have gone through it. And in asking the questions, they will then be interacting with you with also that background information from the CVs. After your brief introduction in 5 minutes, as I said, we would then have the members, each one interacting with you in 5 minutes. The 5 minutes will take into account the questions asked as well as the responses from you, Mr. Mashwangan. I take it that you are now relaxed with all the glitches. I like the confidence that these are realities we're dealing with, and we should be able to look forward instead of being trapped in that. Thanks for that comment. But once again, apologies for that, as Honorable Fako would have already done. But we're looking forward to engaging with you. And I hope you can relax and take this indeed as a conversation, and that we can learn from you, and the members will also be giving the knowledge they would have through their interaction, and that you can learn from that. It's now over to you, Mr. Mashwangan, for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope I am clear on your screens.
Yes, you are from my side, and I think for our other members.
Okay, my name is Posama Shamwani. In terms of academic training, I've been trained in communication. I've got a BA in communication. I've got a BA honors in communication. I've got a MA in communication. And I also have a Master of Business Administration specializing in marketing. And I also did the Executive Development Program with GIBS. And currently, I'm busy writing the last chapter of my PhD with the Wits University, which I am aiming to finish it by the end of this month, which is September. And so the PhD is about digital transformation for social development. So it's about the current status that we are in terms of technology. So I am making sure that I equip myself more in ICT so that I can be able to plow back all the information and experience to those that will be coming after us. And in terms of experience, I have worked at the South African Broadcasting Corporation for a period of about 14 years. I was in television productions, and later I was promoted to be a manager who's managing the television programs, the content that were produced by producers. And I also have the experience in regulating the ICT sector, whereby I was employed by CASA as the general manager responsible for consumer protection. And so we did a lot of work and also a lot of regulations that were meant to protect consumers and were made by the colleagues that I was leading. And so for the Mdda, I am bringing problem solving. I am bringing communication skills. I am bringing empathy, because when you work with people, you must be empathetic, particularly to the issue that will be brought to the board by the executive. I'm also bringing respect, because respect is very much important. We can't interact together and then succeed in discharging our mandate if we don't have respect to one another, respect amongst us as board members, and also respect of the board to the executive. Courage is also what I'm bringing. This is what is crucial for people who are in the leadership position, like in the board. So you need to have courage to be able to take difficult and complex decisions for the interest of the organization, which is the Mdda. So that is what I will be bringing on board if I am successful in these discussions, which the chair said is more of a discussion than the interview. Thank you, Chairperson and honorable members.
No, thanks, Mr. Mashwangane. I will now, without a waste of time, go through the members to interact with you in their 5 minutes. I will start with Honorable Faku, who will then be followed by Honorable Mbele, followed by Honorable Gumbu, and then Honorable Kubeka would be last. I do not really ask questions except to facilitate, but wherever I need to raise a point, just to check what you've already raised with members, I will do so accordingly. But we now are in the space for members to engage with you. Honorable Faku, you are recognized, you can proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, Mr. Poso. I will want to call you Mr. Poso so that I don't,
It's fine.
Yeah. Thank you very much for allowing me. Thank you again for showing interest. We are indeed grateful for a person like yourself with such knowledge, who's been in the sector for quite some time, showing interest. We really appreciate that. We don't take your efforts lightly. We really appreciate it. I will touch more on the technical part of things with your experience that you have. You've worked for the SABC, you've worked for ICASA, and your experience. You know that we have this challenge with Centec in terms of the cost, the signal distribution cost, which is very high. What do you think can be done? Because most of the budget of Mdda mostly goes to Centec. So I would want to hear you, if given an opportunity, what do you think should be done? My second question will be, in the event of digital transformation, how can community media remain relevant and to adopt new ways of doing business? That's my second question. And my last question is, you know that Mdda is currently not achieving its target of research and innovations. So I just wanted to check with, because there's a lot of constraint when it comes to budget. What do you think should be done if given an opportunity? Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Poso.
Thank you, Honorable Member. In terms of costs for signal distribution, which need to be paid to Centec, and I know that all the state entities, including the Mdda, are constrained in terms of budget. And so what needs to happen is that we need to start first negotiating with the National Treasury to make sure that we have a sufficient budget that can be used to pay for the signal distribution, because without that, it means that communities everywhere in South Africa will not be able to receive the information and the education that they receive from the community media. And so once we have negotiated with the National Treasury and explained the constraints in which the community media are experiencing, then we will need to go to the Centec and negotiate price that will be reasonable for the community broadcaster, because they don't make money like the commercial broadcasters. So what they have to pay, in my view, should be different from what must be paid by the public broadcaster and also the commercial broadcasters. And so we will have to show them the constraints in which the Mdda is operating and the constraints that the community media are undergoing. And from there, through negotiation, I think we'll be able to come to an agreement on how much we can pay for signal distribution. So fortunately, I have been trained in negotiation, and I may indicate to the committee that when I was still at ICASA, I was representing the executive in terms of negotiating with the union. I was the chief negotiator for ICASA on the side of management. So I've been negotiating with the union for almost 4 years when I was still at ICASA. So in terms of negotiation, I think this is another skill that I will be bringing to the Mdda. So how can community media become relevant in terms of the new digital era that we are in? The thing that needs to happen is that we need to establish, if it is not there in the Mdda, the unit that is specializing with in digital media, so that they can go out when they do public awareness and educate the community radio stations or community media about the need and the importance of a digital environment, because we can't avoid that, because we are now at the beginning of the 4th industrial revolution, which is something that is going to use a lot of technology at all times, which means that even the technology that they are using for broadcasting need to be digital technology, and then they can't use the technology if they have not been trained. So the MDDA is better placed to train them, and the MDDA is better placed to advise them what type of digital broadcasting technology they can be able to acquire for disseminating information and news to the people. And then in terms of research, which is very much important, we need to make sure that when we do the budgeting for MDDA, we need to have sufficient budget for research. I know that the budget is constrained, and so what one can propose to the board is that let's try to negotiate with the telecom sector, because I know that MDDA get funding, portion of funding from Universal Service Access Fund, which is managed by USASA. And then so that budget can also be used for research, but we also need to maximize our budget in MDD by going out to the telecom sector and ask for funding, because they are not finding the USAF. It's only the broadcasters that are doing that. So we can also talk to them to make sure that they do the funding, so that we can also use that funding to maximize our research. Because even when we go to the National Treasury, when we are going to ask for funding, we need to have empirical evidence, which we got through research, that this is why we need funding. This is what the research is saying we must do. And then once they see that research, they will be more receptive to us, and they will be more than willing to help us, because we don't just thumbs up. We are producing evidence that is needed for them to take that decision of allocating funds.
Thank you, because I was thank you, Mr. Pose. I was a bit worried when you responded to my first question. You did not tell me much about what would you say to the National Treasurer, but on your last point, you have covered me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Honorable Faku. Honorable Mdda.
Thank you, Chairperson. I actually only have one question for Mr. Mashangwane, and it leads on from part of his response to Honorable Faku, where you had mentioned that one of the solutions you would propose is around negotiating with National Treasury, and doing so on with some substantive motivation and some empirical research for increased funding. But of course, you also bring a range of experience, having worked in different fields and organizations. So my question is based on the scenario that if the avenue of seeking increased funding from National Treasury would not be successful, and similarly tapping more into the USAF pots around the license fees, which partnerships from your perspective and based on your experience and networks would you say the MDDA needs to establish or strengthen towards building and ensuring its sustainability, and just generally building partnerships that leverage other resources and build synergy that can take the MDDA into their next chapter? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Bella, for the question. Partnership is very crucial when we are involved in organizational matters. And so if I am successful, I will propose to the board that let us look into partnership with the big corporates in South Africa, the corporates that are servicing communities. For example, In all communities, there is always a support for the South African breweries. I don't necessarily want to promote drinking, but they get a lot of revenue from our people out there in communities. So we will need to talk to them and establish partnership in terms of funding, so that the community media can also be able to help in running the adverts that promote their products. Secondly, I will also propose to the board that let's establish partnership with the beverage company like Coca-Cola, because there's no one in the country who's not consuming the product of Coca-Cola. And then so that partnership can also help us to get some revenue. So there are also big corporates that are producing products that are consumed daily by our people out there in communities. For example, the corporate like those that sell food, we can also talk to them to make sure that they also come on board in terms of bringing some revenue to the Mdda, so that we can be able to go on with the plans and run the mandate of the agency. So these corporates that are all over the country, that are getting support from communities, are the ones that we will need to target, go and negotiate with them, so that they can be able to help with the funding that can make sure that the Mdda is self-sustainable, and also the community media are also self-sustainable. Thank you very much, Honorable Mdda.
Thank you. Honorable Kumbu.
Thank you, Chairperson, and how are you, Mr. Mashong?
Mashangwane.
Did I say it correctly? So I'm sorry if I was butchering your surname.
Mashangwane.
Mashangwane.
Yes.
I have two questions for you. Given the fact that you have spent some time with ICASA, I just want to get your understanding of the nature of the relationship between ICASA and the Mdda. That will be the first. The second question will be, what will be the role of the Mdda in corporate governance? If you can just respond to those two questions, I'll be listening.
Okay, thank you very much. ICASA needs the Mdda, and the Mdda needs ICASA, in the sense that when the Mdda is going to give grants to community media, it needs to establish if they have the broadcasting license from ICASA. And then so if they don't, they will not be able to be assisted by the Mdda. And then ICASA, when I say it needs the Mdda, is because when they issue licenses, those licenses have to be used by someone, which in this case is the community media, like community broadcasters. And then so they cannot just issue license and the license are not being used. So the license can be used when the media come to the Mdda and apply for funding. So that is why I say there's a big relationship between ICASA and the Mdda. And another relationship is one that I will talk from experience. When I was the General Manager for Consumer Protection, my unit of public awareness and information used to go out in the communities, work out there, and then whenever they go out, they will invite the education unit from Mdda, whereby they go together and go and work and make sure that state resources are safe, because if one entity calls a meeting with the community and invited another entity of government, so it means the other entity is going to save more funds. And then next time it will be the Mdda unit that will do the same and invite the unit that was heading in ICASA. So there's that working relationship that has been there, and I guess it will still be there in ICASA, between ICASA and the Mdda, and then we need to make sure that it is strengthened. And then so if I'm successful, I will encourage my fellow board members to make sure that we establish a working relationship with the Council of ICASA, which will be our counterparts, so that whenever we have issues of common interest, we can discuss about them and then make sure that we are pulling in one direction and not compete against each other. Like what normally happens in many entities, you find that they are not pulling in one direction, but they're pulling in different directions. So I will encourage the board that let's have a relationship with the board, and also let's make sure that our EXO also have the relationship with the EXO of ICASA. In that way, you'll find that we are a smooth running machine of the state that is there to empower our communities. Thank you. Oh, okay. The role of corporate governance. Corporate governance is very crucial, more especially when you are providing strategic leadership and direction to an entity like the Mdda. So you need to make sure that they are always compliant with the relevant legislations and policies. For example, compliance with the Public Finance Management Act and also the treasury regulations and all the other relevant legislation that are there. There's need for compliance in terms of that. And there's also a need for making sure that the entity must have the annual performance plan and the strategic plan, which are also tools that are used for corporate governance to make sure that there's performance in the organization, and then which we will go and report to the executive authority and also to yourselves as the portfolio committee on communication. There's also a need to make sure that there are various policies that are established to make sure that the organization is run seamlessly, because if there are no policies in place, then there won't be any way of bringing controls in the organization, controls of making sure that there's always compliance. And there's also a need for having the committees of the board that are responsible for issues of corporate governance. For example, the Finance Committee, the Risk Committee, the Human Resource Committee. So all these committees need to be established so that they are there to make sure that there's corporate governance in the organization. So without that, then there's always a problem whereby you find that the organization is always having issues with the Auditor General. They have always qualified audits. And so we don't want that. We want to make sure that the organization must at all times have unqualified audit. So that is what is important about corporate governance in the organization, Honorable Member. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much. I would like to say Mdda Phosa to run away for not making a mistake. Thank you with the experience that you have tabled to us, Mdda Posa. But what I would like to know also, as you know, that the Mdda is having that small amount of budget, and they've tried to work hard in order that they've managed to receive 3 successful audits with that little amount that they are receiving. And now you are raising on the side of the signal, because if you can check, that is the one thing that is taking a huge amount lump sum on the side of the Mdda. And now you are raising to say you can try also to come up with some plans, research, in order that you can try to engage the National Treasury. Do you think that the National Treasury can be convinced, as it was raising also on the issue of saying it will never ever again try to bail out all these SOEs that we are having? Do you think your plan can be successfully to challenge National Treasury in order to get that funding as you are raising? And also, can I ask to say, do you think the model of Mdda on the side of funding, is it okay in order that it can be convinced to be assisted by National Treasury? The other one that I would like to know, as we are facing the elections, we know that we are having many parties that we are in our country. How can you do or balance in order that all these parties can get a fair share, as we are facing with only these 54 days that we will be approaching the issue of the elections? The last one, do you think that the community broadcaster or the commercial media can compete with those commercial media and broadcaster, the community radio? So can I say, if you are saying yes, or if you are saying no, can you give us a practical solution that the agency can implement? Engosi.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Kubeka. The most important thing is the way you approach issues and the way you approach the decision makers. Before we go to National Treasury to convince them about funding to the Mdda, we need to do our homework as the board. We need to make sure that where we come with innovations that will convince National Treasury. And so National Treasury need to know that the Mdda is serving the historically disadvantaged communities. Communities that have been neglected for a very, very long time. Communities that have been experiencing the digital gap for a long time and still now. And so if we want to make sure that those communities are empowered in terms of technology, we need to make sure that we have funding for that process. And so National Treasury need to be convinced that we are not working with the communities that are well-to-do, communities that are having everything in front of them. We are working with communities that are making ends meet. And if in that case, we really need to make sure that we do like what is happening now with the Department of Social development, whereby there are these grants that people who are unemployed are getting. And I guess that the Department of Social Development went to National Treasury and explained to them how poor are people, how suffering, how struggling are people. So we also need to make sure that we go to National Treasury and indicate to them how are these historically disadvantaged communities suffering, struggling, hunger for information, hungry for education. And then so they are South Africans, they've got the right to be informed in terms of our Bill of Rights. And then if they've got the right to be informed, then how can we inform them if we don't have funding? And then funding can only be accessed from National Treasury. And then so this is what we will have to make sure that we bring the challenges that people are experiencing on the table in order to convince the National Treasury. And then in terms of how can one balance the fair share of broadcasting during election, we will be guided by the regulations of ICASA. I know that there are election regulations of ICASA, whereby various political parties do get a fair share of airtime in line with the seat they have in the National Assembly. And then we will do the same with it, because we can't do anything that is outside the regulations or outside the law. Otherwise, we will be creating a lot of problems for the entity that is very small and that is not having money to go and pay for litigation if there are litigation coming from political parties. So we really need to make sure that we work closely with ICAS, and then as I mentioned earlier on, that we need to work closely on the board level, executive level, and also on managers level, so that what ICASA is doing or what is ICASA established in terms of regulation, we need to know that firsthand, so that we can also implement that when we go in our space of community media. And then the competition between commercial and public broadcasters vis-a-vis community broadcaster. Yes, in a free economy country like South Africa, there's a need for competition. There must be competition at all angles. But sometimes the competition becomes unfair, more especially to the community broadcasters, because they don't generate a lot of revenue as compared to commercial broadcasters and also the public broadcaster. So yes, there will be competition. And then so the advantage that the community broadcasters can take is that they are broadcasting there close to the people, and they're broadcasting what the people would like to see and would also like to hear. And then so in that way, they can make sure that they've got more listeners, or they've got more audience if it's community television, which will make sure that they get sufficient revenue from broadcasters, because I mean from advertisers, because when you have got a larger number of audience and listeners, that's when the advertiser would like to come and invest in your broadcasting platform. So I can't say we must not have competition. There must be competition, but the advantage of the community broadcast that they are there in the community as compared to the commercial broadcasters and the public broadcaster, which is the SABC. So we really need to make sure that yes, there's competition. And I don't know if maybe the competition will not work very well. If not, we can also get assistance from the Competition Commission and check if the competition that is brought in the broadcasting space by the public broadcaster and the commercial broadcaster is such that it is not rendering the community broadcasters useless. So in that way, they can advise us, and then they've got the authority to intervene and make sure that if things need to be addressed in favor of the community broadcasters, that can happen. That is what I can say, Honorable Kubega. I hope I've answered all the questions that you asked me.
Thank you, Mr. Mashoman. Thank you, Honorable Kubega. As we are moving towards closure, I just wanted to come back to the points you've raised when Honorable Mdda asked this question about the funding options. Just to check once again that you talked to corporate, you talked to National Treasury approach. The reality of the matter, like Honorable Kubega was saying, is that you are constrained in terms of National Treasury in that they have been very clear that the fiscals do not allow a situation where they bail out. Now, therefore, the question would be that you are joining, if you are to be considered, an Mdda board that has also learned from experiences of funding projects and projects collapsing, and that you do not have this funding from Treasury that we all think we could get. Do you think the sustainability funding model that they've put does take into account these challenges, and whether it brings alternatives on the board that you were sharing with the committee as you were answering to the questions? And if not, what could be done to ensure that it does speak to that? Thank you. You have 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Honorable Chair. When organizations put systems in place or models in place, these systems or models are not cast on stone. They are there to be reviewed, they are there to be changed. The same goes with the legislation that established the Mdda. At one stage, it will need to be reviewed so that all these questions that the honorable members asked, including myself, can also be catered for in the legislation, because everything has to be done according to the law. And then, so the funding option that I will propose to the board is that the community media exists in various communities, and then in various communities, we have got entrepreneurs that are conducting business in those communities. And that these entrepreneurs or businesses that are there in communities are the ones that we can also make sure that we include in the funding model of the Mdda, so that we can approach them and negotiate with them so that they invest their money in the community broadcast in terms of paying for adverts or promotions that they will run to, like to run. And also, I know that in many communities, there are companies that are running their businesses there. For example, we do have the entities like your Pick and Pay, your Macro, your ShopRite, your Spar. They are doing business in these communities, and they need to have a social responsibility that they have to discharge in those communities. And their social responsibility can come in the form of funding provision to community media in terms of advertising. Because if you say a fund and then you don't give them back to them, they may be reluctant to be able to bring their funding. But if we say we come with a formula of saying when you get this much airtime, you will be requested to pay this much. If you get this much airtime, you'll be able to pay that and convince them. You'll find that this community media are flooded with adverts from those traders that are trading in those communities, because they do get funds from communities, and communities do not necessarily get the social responsibility initiative from this trader. So this is what I will propose that we need to bring on board in the current funding model of the Mdda, and also the issue of sponsorships. If it is not there, we can also look at how we can approach various organizations to sponsor different programs in the community broadcasters. And then so in that way, there will also be funding that will be coming from those entities that are doing business with their communities. So the grants also can also be looked at because Mdda, I think if that is not in the legislation, there can be a proposal whereby we request from government if we can look for funding internationally from organizations that one happened to engage with while I was still at ICASA. The big telecom companies that are in America, I've happened to engage with them. And then if maybe government say, yes, it's okay, you can approach them to get maybe grants from them, we can make use of the network that I have established internationally, and then we go and negotiate for funding that will come the way of the Mdda. That's what I have in my mind for now, Chairperson. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Mashongane. I think we have now come to that point where you need to talk to the committee in 2 minutes, having engaged thus far, before we actually get to the official adjournment of this session. So I'll give you, if you've got a matter you want to raise with the committee before closure, you have got that 2 minutes. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chairperson. First of all, I would like to thank the committee for shortlisting me and giving me the opportunity to come and discuss with you. It was worth my while. I really appreciate that. And so the only question that I have to you as the committee chair is that now that we have engaged on this discussion, as you call it, not necessarily interview, how long is it going to take for us to hear the outcome of this process as a final outcome? I know it is still going to Parliament, and from Parliament it's going to the President as a recommendation. The President will say yes or no, sign, and then give you feedback, and you give feedback to the candidates. I know it's a big process, long process. So roughly from experience, how long does this process of getting the outcome of this process takes, and honorable members?
No, thank you, Mr. Mashongane. As we move towards closure, that's exactly the point I was going to address, that the administrative support will be the area to make the inquiries, like it would have been the situation as you prepared for the interviews. So Mr. Ngoma in that score will interact. But over and above that, as you are aware, and I'm quite happy because you understand these processes, and the stages that we have to go through. But the assurance to give really is that whilst one cannot confirm the exact date, is that these are done in a transparent manner. Because even the interviews we are having, South Africans can follow the discussions we are having. So all these other stages will also become open and transparent, and we can be able to trace that. But as I say, over and above that, at a formal level, inquiry is also made with the administrative support, which is Mr. Ngoma in this score. Now, I'm raising this thing about the time quite carefully, because the decisions that have been made in the country in the past few days as it relates to local government necessitates that Parliament reviews its program, and that will then also affect the time it takes for us to get back to the tabling of the report to the House. Of course, from the committee side, I can guarantee you that we've always wanted to complete processes well on time, because it is in our interest also that there's stability in the governance of these entities that report to the committee. And that's why we're still trying to ensure that we push ahead and complete at least the interviews that we have set for ourselves, irrespective of the reviewal of the Parliament program. But there's that commitment that we would want to get this to a finality, the sooner the better. But we are also alive to the reality that these decisions have now impacted on the programming in Parliament. So I think that for me would suffice. In answering that question, I have not given you a date. And that's go. I may have not answered you fully, but I'm sure you at least have an idea that we are grappling with challenges imposed by realities, and we have to really adjust to that in that score. But I must also take the opportunity to thank you for making time and engage openly with the committee. I take it that indeed that I've raised earlier on before we started, that out of this conversation, surely the members would also learn something from your engagements, as well as that you yourself, you would have taken a few things as you leave the platform, and that we can all use these experiences shared to continue bettering the lives of our people, because all South Africans who are coming before the committee, the interest of getting into these boards is really about serving South Africans better, working with the other arms of government. So I'm just saying we really can confirm that task from where one sits as a facilitator on behalf of the committee, we think we had achieved that part of sharing the experiences and learning from each other. But as I said, then the other processes will then kick in that score. And it will be not good of me not to, of course, wish you again success as you look at the PhD part, the completion, so that we do get to call you differently next time. And it's, I think it should be quite encouraging that it's part of ensuring the goals set in the National Development Plan, that for us to change the socioeconomic conditions of our people, this is also an area that we must work on, of ensuring that at least 11% of PhDs would be realized in a way that helps the research capacity of the country in trying to find solutions based on empirical evidence. I think that's an important aspect. So wish you well in that, and you would hear, as I said, through these transparent processes as well as inquiries from
the committee support. We really thank you for that. So this then closes our session. Thank you.
Inkosi.
Thank you. May I then check Mr. Ngoma? You will then assist us as Mr. Mashwangan leaves the platform. I do know that we have also other meetings set to start at 1, and members would want to get into that. I just wanted to check if you have been able to do the background work that I had asked for, so that we do not get to a cumbersome situation where members are unable to be in many meetings at a go. Mr. Ngoma, are you in? Yeah, it would appear that there's a struggle with Mr. Ngoma, but I can just confirm, honorable members, an agreement that instead of taking the next candidate now, we'll do that after the House sitting, as it was also planned that we'll meet this evening. Otherwise, the ones that we have dealt with, I must really thank you, members, for your patience, and that we are able to push this work as far as is possible. Indeed, the reviewal of the parliamentary program will impact on the work that we do. We'll just have to adjust to that, honorable members. Otherwise, this session stays adjourned until we meet in the evening, as we would continue with the other candidates that are left. Thank you, honorable members.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Adira. Hi, Adira. Mr. Lee. Hi, Adira.
Hi. I
Hi.
moved away a bit for a second. You were looking for me?
No worries. Yeah. Do you know if I end this meeting?
I can't hear you, Tembe.
Another link. For the next meeting at 6 o'clock. Hey.
Yeah.
Do I need to create another link, or would this one still work?
I think it will still work.
Yes,
Okay. It works for the day.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.